This is Role-Playing Public Radio, episode 79, Horror for the Here and Now. I'm Ross Payton, and with me, as always, Tom Church.
Wow, you broke the format. You didn't introduce yourself first.
Yeah.
What? Are you trying something new?
I'm trying to freak you out, Tom. This is the Halloween, this is the horror episode, so I wanted to, throw you off so you'd be all spooked out.
Ross, it's me. Yeah. You're going to have to try harder.
Well,
wear a dress or something. That'll trip me out.
Yeah, I don't want to try that hard, though.
Yeah, I could wear a dress and freak you out.
Yes.
It would work.
It would. Please don't wear a muumuu.
Dude.
Yeah.
It's me.
Anyway, so we're doing a episode on horror because the last episode was about Base Raiders, my new Kickstarter project, but this is October, Halloween month, so I figured we need to do at least one horror-themed episode because we do so much of it on the Actual Play podcast.
We do. We're known for doing the occasional foray into the scary.
Yeah. And I wanted to focus. I mean, we've done episodes in the past talking about general horror advice about pacing, rhythm, and that kind of thing. But this time I'd like to talk about, we'd like to talk about the general aspects of doing horror in the here and now, i.e. 2012 or later, as opposed to doing horror even 10 years earlier, 2002 or something like that. We want to do, so this episode is going to talk about what's unique about today, about what's going on in the world and what kind of things make things scary and what are trends in horror that are interesting and worth looking into, like the creepypasta, So anyways, we have a bit of news first. As I mentioned earlier, Base Raiders, my Kickstarter project for the big RPPR Kickstarter project, is still underway. You still have time to contribute. For $15 or more, you can get access to 10 preview episodes of the Actual Play podcast. So I know a lot of you are fiends for that. And so if you want to get hooked up with your drug of choice, you can get a PDF of the game when it comes out and get 10 actual preview episodes before then. And if you get to $100 or more, we'll do a special online Q&A session where Tom and I will be hanging out on webcam on probably Google Hangouts or something like that.
Yeah.
And we'll answer your questions.
Answer your questions while you stare at our faces clearly made for radio.
Thanks, Tom, for the vote of confidence. You can see me in the video for the Kickstarter for Base Raiders. I actually...
You can see me, and you can see me in our Artemis Command video.
And several others, too.
Yeah.
You're pretty much in all of them, because, you work for free, so I...
Yeah. I'm very happy for that scale work we're getting.
Yeah, you get 100% of the YouTube ad profits, which is, let's not talk about it.
I put that penny and a half to good use.
Fair enough. So check out the rewards, check out the Kickstarter. Even if you're not a fan of the superhero genre, there should be a lot of interesting stuff there for you to check out. We also are going to... I also wanted to mention the another Kickstarter for all of you probably remember Cody Walker, who was a former member of RPPR's Actual Play group. He's
very missed.
Yes, he's gotten too busy with real life stuff. But he is doing a Kickstarter of his own called Noir City. It's a comic book where the it's basically old pagan gods plus noir crime hardball genre, and it's got a good artist who does. It reminds me a little of Ben Templesmith in terms of the art style. So if you're a fan of Cody's work, you should check it out. It's only $5 for a digital copy of the comic book, and so those are
Lobster commands it.
Yes, the cathartic lobster commands it. So I think that...
Do not deny his exoskeleton.
So that kind of covers the news. So why don't we talk about the topic? So
let's.
Yes. So Tom, horror in the here and now. I know when we first started talking about it, you want to talk about some of the stuff that's sort of unique to horror now, or sort of the new cliches, I guess you could.
Yes. Cliches, I mean, they stay cliches for a reason, but even the oldest cliches have to be updated.
Yeah.
Like, let's go back to, say, the original Friday the 13th.
Yeah.
Isolation is a big part of that.
Yeah.
It's a big part of a lot of horror.
Yeah.
And back in, I believe it was 1979 when that came out, or 1980.
Halloween came out in 1979, I think. Yeah.
But
Friday the 13th, I think, came out in 1980, 79 or 80 or something like that.
Well, at that point, it was actually a lot easier to isolate people.
Yeah.
Because, all you had to do was have a blackout, and boom.
Yeah.
Wherever they are, they're isolated.
Yeah, the landlines go out, the
power goes down.
Yeah.
or the road is washed out.
Yeah.
But that's a lot harder to do nowadays.
Well, even 10 years ago, it was easier to do because 10 years ago, you'd have like the cell phone goes out unless it's a Nokia, but then the battery runs out. Nokia phones are indestructible.
But they didn't have GPS on them.
Yeah, but that's exactly it. Today, now everybody, it's not a cell phone, it's a smartphone. So it's basically a literally handheld computer.
It's a handheld GPS device and complete store of all human knowledge still available at your fingertips.
Right, and you can. Unless you can always do the thing the battery runs out, but that's kind of cliche. So I think that's a good point. You can't do the traditional isolation thing, which is physically isolated. That what we think of isolation, but I think isolation is still very much a part, and it's very possible to do it. It's just
you have to do it differently.
Yeah, I think people that are in isolation, it's more subtle. It's not as obvious today. Like there are millions of people that are isolated, but you can't really know you don't really know who they are.
It's not the crazy hermit.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they're still there, but they're very long. But people next door to you are isolated. The guy who's unemployed, who's been unemployed for a year, he can't get a job. He's living off of that unemployment, and he doesn't have any friends. He can't go out because he doesn't have money. So he just sits and he festers in his house. So if something weird starts happening to him, who can he go to? Or someone in an abusive relationship, or someone who's an illegal immigrant, or someone who is a refugee, someone there's a million or has a disability of some sort, physical disability. Our healthcare, healthcare.
Yeah, it's more about isolated people than isolated places.
That's a good point. Yeah, people are isolated. Places aren't isolated. Like you can always get you can get cell phone reception anywhere, but if you don't have anyone, who are you going to call? Because the social and civil services are being slashed back, or they're not, or they're incompetent or corrupt. The police are viewing the people as enemies now more than anything else.
And also, and of course, in today's economy, a lot of people are just battening down the hatches and looking after their own. Yeah.
That's true. So, and we're not talking like this is the way things are. We're talking about general themes. So, we're not saying we're not going the, Alex Jones, conspiracy theory radio. It's just like, these are the kind of things I think people respond to. I mean, one of the things you were talking about also was the idea of the classic monsters being how they're being viewed today,
Yeah. I mean, man, the poor vampires, I feel sorry for them, really, because when people think vampires now, they don't think monster that sucks blood. They think gorgeous, hunky guy that sparkles in the sunlight.
Right.
And that is just sad. They deserve better than that, but that's right now what people think of.
Well, yeah, I mean, that is thing, but that's also kind of sinister in its own way because, a lot of critics have pointed out how this sort of conditions young women to think that abusive relationships are normal. And that's a lot creepier than Dracula. The idea that some guy who watches you while you sleep without your permission.
The thing is, what's scary about vampires now, it's not the blood-drinking undead monster.
Yeah.
It's the stalker.
Yeah.
Which is... I agree. You should be scared of that, but
yeah, and that seems to be like a very contemporary crime now. Is like the idea of stalking. I mean, stalking's been around longer for that, obviously, but
it's easier than ever to do.
It's easier than ever to do, and the consequences are even more dramatically. I mean, we've all heard of the story of Amanda Todd, this teenager who's killed herself over, because of being bullied online bullying. I mean, that's like from a Philip K. Dick novel. It's like the idea you can be driven to suicide by anonymous people over the internet that are just harassing you. Or of course, in Todd's case, there's apparently bullying in her school as well. So
right.
I don't know the exact details, but these are the kind of things that, are themes that people think are scary now. So you can kind of see this as how these are the kind of things that are showing up in horror movies and horror stories, and the kind of things that I think are interesting, like that will make players respond in a horror game. So,
because I've seen there have been some pretty good movies. It's about just a stalker.
Yeah.
Not even a slasher, just...
Well, I mean, that's the thing. Twilight is about a stalker. Only it's saying the stalker is right. The stalker is the good guy. The stalker is the one she should be with. So if somebody's being like this to you in real life, that's a sign of true love, not a sign of an abusive
to get the hell out.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's terrifying in its own way.
And like another classic, werewolves. Now, granted, their popularity has dwindled dramatically.
Yeah.
And but the few movies I've seen, I mean, obviously the underworld movies, I would not call them horror.
Right.
But it's but the few, and there have been some werewolf movies out, most of them kind of direct to DVD. But now they tend to more put them in big cities than the woods anymore.
Right, because that's what people understand. I mean, how many people in growing up now have even seen the woods? I mean, like,
camping is not
the entire world is becoming a city, basically, an urban sprawl, and the few, we're losing wilderness, and the wilderness that's left is harder to get to,
And there's few untamed, untouched wilderness. I mean, a lot of the places, the wilderness areas are developed wilderness. Like, there are trails, there's infrastructure, there's electricity.
Right.
It's no longer, just we're deep out in the woods where there's nothing.
Well, I mean, there is, but they're harder to get to. I mean, I think that the easily accessible wilderness is not there. There's no longer a place you can drive to and be totally out in the woods. I mean, there are, places that you can get to, like the Alaskan wilderness.
Oh, yeah. Well, the movie The Gray.
Yeah.
That's brilliant, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. So there's still quite a bit of that shit out there.
But you can't just go there.
Yeah, it's a really exotic place. You have to go out of the way to do that. But I think, the reason why the werewolves are in cities is because, nobody's going to relate to rural stuff anymore.
No.
I mean, the percentage of the population that's rural is going down, and, again, urban sprawl, suburban sprawl, which is a new thing, is sort of like, or newer.
There's nothing but miles and miles of of identical housing.
Of housing and strip malls and office parks and kind of shit that's like spread out just far enough that you need a car. But like there's nothing remarkable about it. They're all sort of the same kind of bland designs, that same sort of banality. I know a lot of changeling games would use that as the sign of where the bad guys are. Like, beware the bland office park, So
for people do not dream there.
Yeah, exactly. So what does this mean for you for running a horror game? So some of these things we just listed off sort of pretty quickly.
Yeah, kind of like if I was going to run a horror game, often the woods isn't a place I would go to in the modern day.
Right.
I would. I think it's, once again, I think I've said this before on another episode, but I think the more common and recognizable the place is, the better it is for a horror game.
I think again, close. I mean,
that's the way I feel about it.
Well, wilderness, like it's. I think it can be the wilderness, but not just the easy accessible wilderness. Like, I think Marble Hornets is brilliant.
Yeah.
In how it takes parks and trails, and then of course abandoned buildings and makes them utterly terrifying. You're just far out. I mean, you can still hear cars in the distance,
but they might as well be a million miles away,
right? Because the Slender Man's right fucking there. And that's one of the things I'm most interested in about horror right now, is this emergence of really new ideas and stories that I'm sort of grouping all together into what's commonly called creepypasta. By that creepypasta, I mean things like Slender Man, which has had Marble Hornets, and then several other video series, which I haven't even watched yet. And just tons of stories. The video game Slender, which is free.
I played that.
Yeah, it's a neat little game.
It's simple as hell, but it's very effective.
And Caleb, he's a teacher, and he tells us that his students are into it as well, and they're just not on the cutting edge of a lot of things, but. Then, aside from creepypasta, there's also the SCP Wiki, the Secure, Contain, Protect protocols, where people write these stories that are just these bizarre objects and entities that have to be imprisoned, and the procedures for doing that, and that's really cool. And then there's even stuff by individual authors. I know Candle Cove, which was done by Chris Straub.
A very short story.
Yeah, but it's being passed around like creepypasta. And then 4chan. If you go to 4chan, they have their X board and a few other boards where people write up this new creepypasta shit. And there's always really good, interesting stuff, photoshops and stories, and they're all not quite like Slender Man. I know you can't really say, well, Slender Man's just a ripoff of, or just a derivation of X. Like, Twilight's obviously, a derivation of Dracula and Anne Rice, and, that whole vampire tradition is just the next thing. But you can't really go to Slenderman. Oh, well, Slenderman came from that. You
No,
can't really-
it's original. It's new.
Yeah, exactly. So that's one of the things I find really interesting about it. And I think Marble Hornets kind of gives you a blueprint for how to do this kind of story, how to do horror in the here and now. I mean, let's see, we have the main character, Jay, and he's isolated because who can he talk to about this?
Yeah.
Even though he has a cell phone, he apparently has a lot of money because he can just afford hotel rooms
for months at a time.
Yeah, and a car and all this other shit. But he's being stalked by this thing. He doesn't know.
Well, by a thing and by Alex.
Well, eventually, like that's kind of a twist. Like first, Alex is his friend
that he's trying to find, and then he finds him,
and then he's not who he seems to be. And then there's Tim, and then there's these characters. It's about ambiguity too. Like you don't know who you can trust. You don't know what's really going on. There's kind of this David Lynchian thing, I think, in a lot of really new horror stuff where you're not like, Twilight at least tells you these are vampires. This is blah blah blah. It's a very traditional kind of story in that sense. This is what a vampire is.
And they haven't really even talked about Slender Man much in that.
He's just that thing,
that thing.
I don't even think they've used the word Slender Man in there.
No, actually, I believe in actual Marble Hornets he's referred to as the Operator.
Yeah, and that's true. And there's the sigil, the operator sigil, that circle with the X through it.
But yeah, I remember one episode they were walking, like mentioning some story about hanging people from trees and their limbs would warp. But that's the only one I can remember they've actually gotten into.
Yeah, and they've done like 64, 65 episodes, something like that. And so there's this ambiguity. So one, I hope they actually do wrap it up. I hope they don't pull a Lost. You hear me, Slender Man people? Or Marble Hornets people? Come up with a fucking backstory.
And end it.
Yeah. Well, at least give me some sort of resolution. Like, give me a season finale. If you want to do another season after that, fine. Revenge of Slender Man, fine. Just fucking
watch it.
Wrap it up. Anyway, but so that's kind of the one thing I wanted to mention earlier that we're talking about classic monsters. On the flip side of Twilight, which is bad for horror fans, and I'm sorry. Well, I had nothing to do with it, obviously, but it's bad. But there's hope still for good horror, reinvention of the old, and that's The Walking Dead.
Yeah,
among other things. Also, The True Blood, which I've heard good things about. I haven't watched yet.
There have been actually that one surprised me because the vampires are monsters.
Yeah.
That's, I think, important. You can actually have the idea of the tortured vampire character.
Well, yeah,
it's been done, but it can be done well.
Well, it is a vampire by definition. I mean, ever since Dracula, that's sort of
but you can do it. But you can do it and still make it an interesting story.
Well, yeah.
So I think it does that.
Yeah.
Some of the characters on there, I really enjoy.
Yeah. You've watched True Blood? Mm-hmm. Are you all the way caught up with it? Or?
I'm not caught up by any means.
Oh,
no.
okay.
But I've seen it. I've seen enough of it to know what's going on.
Oh, okay. So there's some hope in there, but I think The Walking Dead also shows us, one observation I got from the Kenneth Haidt, the panel that I was on at Gen Con about zombies. Kenneth Haidt mentioned that, you can't do there's only 36 or 7 kinds of plots. That's a classic thing, like man versus God, and then one of those story archetypes is man versus nature. And in classical literature and traditional literature, that would be something like Jack London, Call of the Wild,
the Gray.
But you can't, like, the Gray is sort of the exception of the rule. You can't really do that plausibly now because, like, we have GPS.
Most nature we can conquer.
Well, no, we have, even if you get a plane crash in the middle of nowhere, we have GPS and people are going to know where to look. Like, it's unless you're in a fucking Cessna and you go in the middle of the desert like some crazy ass rich guy, you're probably going to be found, sooner or later. It's no longer, when it happens, it's not a typical thing. It's like, it's news when somebody actually gets lost in the wilderness.
Yeah, it's not DB Cooper jumping out of a plane anymore.
Right. Well, I mean, that was unusual because he chose to do that. But, like, that's the whole point. Like, 200 years ago, if somebody got lost in the wilderness, they just called that
fucked.
Tuesday.
Yeah,
that's like, that happens. That's just a fact of life.
I mean, the Donner Party was only memorable because of the cannibalism and the number of people involved. But
yeah, the wilderness was terrifying to people back then. That's why people like, oh god, people back then raped nature and destroyed it. Well, yeah, because they were fucking terrified of it. Nature was scary.
Because nature, damn, nature, you scary.
Exactly. But now we've conquered it, or we've sort of gotten over it. So when a person goes out in the wilderness far enough that they're actually in danger or in peril, that's news. That's a television show, you know, like that Man versus Wild, you know, or just any sort of survival story is like fucking news. Like, holy shit, people actually got lost in the wild. So you can't have that anymore. So anyways, my point is, the reason why the zombie genre is partly because of why it's so popular now is because it's a way of doing man versus nature that doesn't involve contrivances like GPS is out. Like Walking Dead is man versus nature. Like
zombies are a force of nature.
Yeah, they're just like a hurricane or a plague. I mean, they're literally a plague. So if there's a plague that ended society as we knew it, we lived in lawless times. This is kind of similar to what would happen to, you know, in terms of what's possible, what's not possible. So that's the kind of thing that you need to think about The Walking Dead. And so that's a really interesting. Kenneth Hyatt said that, not me. So I'm just like, which is on the panel, which was the previous thing. You know, we posted that on the podcast. So go listen to it. So just these are just kind of ideas again so we talk about isolation, we're talking about the classic monsters, and we talk about like creepypasta. So these are some things you can think about. But one thing that I think will scare a lot of people right now is sort of the global financial crisis, sort of the ongoing turmoil. And I know it's not as bad as it was in 2008, obviously,
right?
But it never seems to end, does it? There's always this like we're still in a recession. We're still not getting enough jobs back.
Just when you start to forget about it, there's another home foreclosure report,
right?
Or another
banks banks foreclosing on houses they don't even own. You know, and that's another aspect of horror, like Kafka and The Wire on, you know, crack, you know, like the massive bureaucracies just destroying your lives without, you know, I mean, that's pretty terrifying.
Yeah.
So,
and really, yeah, it's kind of like that. It's not so much the evil of everything; it's the indifference of everything.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's sort of another element. That's, I mean, from a practical point of view for running games, that's how you can justify that sort of indifference, that sort of casual evils, how you justify no one's going to help your characters in a crisis, you know, like the cops are understaffed, you know, their budget cuts, you know, because of austerity. So there's the lights go out. What do you mean the street lights go out? Well,
brownouts.
Yeah, well, no, they just cut the budget. Like we can only have a third of them on. So there's one at the other end of the block. You're in darkness now. Have fun with a vampire chasing you. Like, that's the thing that happened. Like, there's some town out in Colorado where they're like, well, we don't want to pay any more taxes on shit, so let's just turn the lights off at night. Let's just turn the street lights off. So it's like, wow.
Yeah, or I heard a similar story like that, where like the fire department, like you have to pay for fire protection in this one place.
Yeah,
and if you don't, they won't respond to your house.
Well, no, they will. I actually know a little more about it. The details are there's a town and then there's the county around it. So there's a lot of houses that are outside of city limits, so they don't pay any of the city taxes, including taxes for firefighters. So if they want fire protection, you have to pay like $75 a year for a badge on your house that says, yeah, fucking come help me if my house is on fire.
And the guy's house caught fire.
Yeah, and so the fire department came,
but not to put the fire out at his house, but to make sure it didn't spread.
Right, because that's how it is. Like, you can't buy it right then and there. It's not $75 to get free. You have to pay it ahead of time. Because if they just had it then you know they lose money because nobody would pay, you know, ahead of time. Everyone just wait until their house is on fire. So, you know, it was national tragedy. But I mean, that's the thing. People were living outside of the city, so they wouldn't pay the taxes, so they didn't get the firefighters. And then they complain, well, wait, how dare you let my house burn down? Well, you know, it's tragic, and that's kind of the thing is this. You know, back in the 80s, everyone was afraid of nuclear apocalypse, you know, with the cold. And, you know, back in the 50s, we're still afraid of this.
Well, shit, I mean, the movie The Day After scared the crap out of Reagan.
Yeah, that's true.
It really did. Actually traumatized him.
I mean, and you can see it in stuff like the Terminator series, you know, obviously. And then even earlier in the 50s, you had horror movies like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Yeah.
Nuclear fears.
Well, nuclear fears, but also Invasion of the Body.
Communists.
Yeah, communists, subversion, infiltration. You can see how today, of course, the idea that's like quaint. That's like
the thinking of empires taking us over.
Yeah, nobody wants to take us over. Like, everything's just falling apart. You know, there's nobody, and that's why The Walking Dead is, I think, resonating so well. Is because, again, everything's collapsing. Nobody knows why. all these events are sort of disconnected. Nobody has a real clear narrative of who's good, who's evil, what's the right path, what's the wrong path. So you have this terrible ambiguity. And like one thing that I found out is really terrifying. Greece is sort of the at the forefront of this European austerity crisis, where they're like, we have to make budget cuts to pay our debt off, and the people are like, no, don't. We want things like healthcare and food and jobs, and
also we don't.
Well, you didn't pay your fucking taxes, and so they're back and forth. So there have been a lot of riots and a lot of social instability and a lot of chaos. But the newest crisis that I'm finding out is that the police of Greece have a lot of membership in this organization called the Golden Dawn, which they're neo-fascists. So like the police, the Golden Dawn are literally beating protesters up, and police are watching them do it. And protesters are literally begging for help from the police, and the police are like, "Yeah, you deserve it." I mean, that's terrifying. That they're sort of these thugs. Just again, it's sort of a banal sort of thing. Just you don't need a monster; you just need some jackbooted thug breaking your face in,
and then other people to ignore it.
Yeah, exactly.
Look away.
And I know, and so a lot of the fears today are sort of political or partisan in nature. I know both sides of like both political parties think the other one's the Antichrist, and that's sort of like a thing that's going on for decades and decades. But so that's not really new. But you can kind of see how it's not really one party. It's just sort of the way the people that are in power are trying to take both. I think it's interesting that both the conservatives and liberals in this country and others think the elites are the ones screwing them over, and then it's the liberal elites, or it's the Koch brothers, or it's always the rich guy screwing over the little people. But I don't know. It's these are interesting themes to work with in a horror game. I don't know if you, but again, there's the thing that I don't want to like fully endorse that thing is because that might get a little too political. Well, and how you want to make horror immediate and personal too. You don't want to make it like a conspiracy theory where
that's suspense, not horror.
Yeah, that's a good point. And you have to be careful about how many things you throw in. Again, talking about banality, we talk about things like how we're so indifferent to stuff now. We have information overload and like. Mass shootings practically every month, every few weeks. By the time they have one, the next day it's off the most part out of the news.
And actually, I was thinking like, what movie actually could have made a really good horror movie if its tone was different, a little different. Hot Fuzz, the town council.
Yeah.
Of that town.
Yeah,
I really think. I mean, if they got rid of the comedic overtones, and just had like Simon Pegg's character come to this town and he just starts seeing all this stuff that everyone keeps claiming as accidents.
Yeah,
and then he finds out they're actually killing people just to maintain the illusion of their town.
Yeah,
and if it had actually ended with him like getting killed after encountering them, that would have been an effective horror story.
I think I think a lot of people would resonate with that. I mean, there's a lot of, I mean, you can see this in kind of the conspiracy theories that are popular around, everything from death panels to stories about. There's actually true things. People like political prisoners in totalitarian countries being harvested for organs while they're still alive and stuff like that. So you can see that same kind of that element, the idea that there's too many people and we only the right people need to live. We need to cut off those moochers, those bad people, those punk kids.
Another thing I've noticed, a lot of horrors become really secular.
That's true.
The devil is not a big part in horror movies now.
Yeah, like in the 70s you had,
Well, it started with The Exorcist.
The Omen, the Seventh
Rosemary's
Seal,
Baby.
Or Seventh Sign. Rosemary's Baby, very good.
But now, I mean, it's demons, but they're either...
They're like Clive Barker demons. Like Hellraiser.
Or old pagan stuff. But it's... The actual devil rarely is used. I mean, there's that awful movie Devil about the people trapped in the elevator.
Oh yeah,
it was awful, by the way.
Yeah, no, I saw it too. It was pretty.
But the actual Satan is very rarely used now.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I'm sure I could think of exceptions. I mean, because any classic monster like that gets used sooner or later. But
it's not. Yeah, most
Actually, don't the Paranormal Activity movies have that satanic?
They say demon. They don't say the devil. They just say demon.
Okay, yeah, sort of like a generic evil being.
Spirit being.
Yeah. That's true. They don't make it a Christendom thing like End of Days. Which is the Schwarzenegger thing was very explicitly Christian,
and that was an action movie though.
Yeah, well, of course, but
actually, I think that another thing that can be worked about that is, so you can't use the old fashioned defenses like if it's not the Christian devil or a Christian demon, then crosses and holy water and shit's not going to be effective.
Yeah, true.
I kind of like, some horror movies, you have to actually, to defeat the demon, you have to employ things that might be as bad or worse than the demon.
Like what?
Is
this about Sinister or is this something else? No, I know you want to talk about that.
No, I do want to talk about Sinister, but no, it's something else. Like Stephen King did it a few times. When he just had a demon in one of his stories, and to fight that demon, the main character had to summon another one.
Okay.
Who would then save him from that demon, but now he is indebted to this one.
Right. Or even in things like It, where the way to defeat the demon is definitely secular, like the lucky rock or.
Well, in actuality, in the actual book of It, they actually call upon another cosmic entity to do it.
Oh, okay. I thought in the movie.
No, the movie is very different than the book.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't want to read.
And actually, there's actually several scenes in the book written from It's point of view.
Oh, neat.
And it is basically like a old one creature.
There's a Stephen King wiki out that explains all the connections between the stories.
And most of his stories have a connection.
Yeah, there's his own mythos. One other thing that I think, going back to isolation, other things, sort of the opposite, the idea of social media. And that's sort of very popular. Yeah, obviously sort of like a major foundation of modern life now is you have to be on Facebook, and
Twitter.
Twitter. And so it manifests itself in different ways. Obviously, like in Marble Hornets, that's how how the medium, like how it's recorded. Like, 50 years ago, if somebody encountered something like Slender Man, they might write a journal. They might take some photos. They might even take some...
Or have some black and white, choppy black and white footage of it.
Right. But they wouldn't tell the public about it. But today, he can just anonymously post it on YouTube and be like, hey, guys, oh my God, I'm encountering this weird shit. What should I do? And so it becomes a sort of engagement thing. And... You obviously, as a horror GM, you have a lot of stuff to work with. I know the Laundry's done one where, like, there's a scenario in one of their books, Black Bag Jobs, where the whole thing is a social media site, like, is a honeypot trap for unsuspecting people. You sign up and then you get possessed or infected or something like that. And so that's a very obvious route. But there's obviously, there's a moral panic now about online bullying. There is some justification, like we said, this girl was bullied to death through the internet. And so how does that work? And then, of course, the thing that people don't think about is there's a great quote I've heard about Facebook. It's like, if you're not paying for it, you're not the customer, you're the product. Mm-hmm. And so on Facebook, all your data is being mined by Facebook so they can give it to advertisers, so they can better advertise to you. And so you got to think about...
the idea of that's creepy as shit if you really think about it.
Oh, yeah, undoubtedly. Because it's like, people worry about government spying on you. And
forget corporations spying on you.
Yeah, and they're building...
Madison Avenue spying on you.
Yeah, so so you have to think about how that's being... influencing you and how they're spying on that. Obviously for horror GM, like how did the bad guys know where you were? Well, they figured out who you were by your social media profile. Oh, well, he posted this, and then he posted these cryptic warnings, and then he disappeared, and his phone GPS showed he was here in this graveyard. Oh, well, he's obviously made contact with the old ones. We need to go kidnap his ass, or something like that. So that's the panopticon, and it's very direct too. And I mentioned this before, probably on some other podcast or something like that. But we think also we're sort of engaged in war. The Afghanistan war is now the longest war we've ever had.
Yeah.
But for most people most people really don't care. Like, I'm sure a lot of us want to pull out. I mean, we want to pull out, get out of the war, or they want to just kill the Taliban or turn the desert into glass, or something like that. Mm-hmm. But like, you're not going to go out and protest it anymore. You're not going to spend a lot of energy trying to get people out of it or anything like that. It's just, you got too much shit to do anyway. But
and you can only, and really, people have short attention spans.
Right. And the thing about the Afghanistan war, people think, well, that's just over there. It's not going to affect me,
Right.
And the thing is, it does affect you because what's happened, and you can see this in several different ways, is what we've learned. They've adopted this strategy called the COIN, counterinsurgency, in order to pacify urban, Kabul and all these places. And they started adopting this strategy and using it on us, on the people in the cities. And you can see that like drones. We started using drones to find the Taliban over the desert. Now you can see drones in the border. And police departments are getting drones. And who the fuck else knows who's getting drones? And then you can see, how they're doing crowd control, how protesters are being treated like enemy combatants. Whether or not you agree with the protesters, I mean, people you have a right to peacefully assemble.
Well, yeah, like the video that the New York police who were pepper spraying people already in a cordon.
Right. And so, what if you're just some schmuck who is just on his way to work and you get into a protest and, you're caught between the hippies and the cops, that's a terrifying thing. And then you get caught in the system and then you're, grinding away. And then, of course, that's a great scene for a what do they call it? A powder keg ready, waiting for someone to ignite it. Someone uses a bit of magic or throws a monster in there and then, oh shit, all
hell breaks loose.
Yeah. So that's I think that would be a very memorable point. And you're kind of, so yeah, these are just some of the things, again, we're sort of throwing out to give you ideas for modern, like 2012 scenarios.
Yeah. And also I'm going to actually mention a movie now, Sinister.
Yeah, right.
It was one of the first horror movies in a long time that actually made an impression on me.
Yeah.
They're one of those that afterwards I was kind of like, oh, I'm still a little creeped out here because after leaving the theater at night. It's very hard to do that with me with horror movies. This one actually did it because it kept things. Because it had such stunning visuals, coming from very unclear media. At the point in the story that this guy finds reels of Super 8 footage.
Right.
It's labeled like, the barbecue, the pool party, and it's showing like families, just having fun. And then it suddenly cuts to all the members of the family being killed. And it's not, they did less is more. It's not, they don't show them getting chopped up by a lawnmower or something. It's like the opening scene of the movie, and I'm going to say it here. So this is a spoiler warning. Skip this part if you don't want to hear it.
All right.
Now the opening scene is just Super 8 footage of a family of like four members of a family tied to a tree with bags over the heads and nooses, and then the limb is just slowly lifted and they just start strangling.
Jesus.
That's it.
Wow.
Yeah, there's no sound to it, just Super 8 footage of that. And I like to do that because it's showing that, usually older stuff is a little more scary than newer stuff.
Yeah.
And that kind of goes to technology.
Yeah.
That's scary in movies. You could, once before, grainy black and white photographs were good in horror movies. Then it became, you could later do color stuff and then old reel-to-reel footage.
Well, what's interesting,
and then Super 8 footage and then now VHSs.
Yeah. With the movie VHS, for example, that's interesting. It even goes back further than that. Like Lovecraft's time, what he thought was scary were old medieval books, grimoires, these leather tomes that were just massive and bound in
moldy
human flesh
tomes,
and chains on them, and shit like that, and just from vellum pages and all this other stuff. So, but people today, you might as well be talking about rocks from Mars, like that shit. Like no one is going to be able to even seen a book like that unless they've so you have to something that's unfamiliar yet familiar, that kind of uncanny valley of
Super
objects.
8 footage worked very well.
It does, yeah, and that's definitely
because it's color motion pictures.
Yeah,
just grainy enough and just of a lower quality that it's different than than most of the stuff you see.
Right. You're not like most people who watch that movie have never seen that in real life. They've never watched a Super 8 movie. They've never touched it and they've never held it. It's alien to them, but they can kind of get a sense of what it's supposed to be.
Yeah, and VHS is like, you can get some stuff on VHS tapes you can't get with DVDs. Like kind of VHS distortion.
Right.
Like when we were watching the found footage festivals.
Yeah.
Some of those videos that they had errors and damage that you just can't make in DVDs.
Right. Now it's interesting. Yeah. So the aesthetics of anachronistic formats sort of create a sort of heighten the effect of the image. It becomes more important because it's rare ups obscure. I mean, it's not always scary though. Like you see how Instagram made oodles of money by basically applying 1970s film filters onto cell phone camera pictures. Oh, my meal looks like I shot it with a Polaroid from 1975. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So, but you have that same thing in like. And it's the idea that I think it's about authenticity. Like that's more authentic than just a generic cell phone camera with sharpness and rich colors and everything like that. Something. And those things are more authentic, so they're scary. So it's more like they're real. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's not just something you came up with in a studio. And that's what I think one of the reasons why Marble Hornets works up. They use many digital video cameras, but because of the handheld and you can hear the camera being jostled around and you can hear the guy turning the camera on and off and the angles are frequently
I love the chest harness for the camera.
Yeah, exactly.
That kind of thing.
You can see that, and that really works. That really makes it feel like you're actually watching something forbidden. And so with the sinister stuff, you have this idea like that's I think the key, obviously, to horror is something forbidden that you just found. You're not supposed to be watching this. You're supposed to be absorbing this media. So I think that's key. And so that kind of changed. Like now, to bring up the counterexample, I actually watched VHS, and they do that. They do the video distortion stuff. The VHS, the bands you can see across it, and it's the movie does some really interesting stuff, like visually. There's some really cool scares in it. But the problem with that is just a matter of basic storytelling. All the characters, almost all of them, are totally unlikable. They're just like all the guys are assholes and they're just
kind of like the Feast movies.
Yeah, you just want them to die. You're like, oh god, these people are just
And in horror, you do kind of have to care about some.
Yeah, it's like the filmmakers were trying too hard to make edgy horror shorts. You know what I mean? If they just tried to tone it down a little bit, like not the scares or the kills or whatever, but like the characters. Like you're not Tarantino, you're not Aaron Sorkin, you're not going to do anything really clever with these characters. Just don't make us want them to die. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So that's my mini review of VHS. Yeah. So
then you got to care about at least a few of them.
Yeah. So I mean, some things about horrors don't change. So I think. So horror right now in the 2012 and probably next year, if assuming Mayan Apocalypse 2012 doesn't destroy us, which it totally will.
Mm-hmm. Just like it was totally supposed to in 2000, or like it was totally supposed to the few hundred times.
No, it was always
in history.
2012. I never heard about the Mayan Apocalypse.
Actually, there's
you're thinking about Y2K.
Well, yeah, but there's a website of everyone who ever predicted the end of the world in recorded history and the date he predicted it was going to happen. There's well over 100 of them.
Nice.
And we're still here.
Well, yeah, but sooner or later, one guy's going to be right.
Yeah, well, when the sun finally goes red giant 6 billion years, I can't give you a date, but like 6 billion years from now, when the sun goes red giant, sure, then life on Earth will end.
One guy, Larry, the last man on Earth, is like, I told you. Oh.
But no one cares.
Yeah. No one cares. So when you're doing a game set in the here and now, you think about these things we've been talking about to try and make your scenario more unique. Instead of like, a lot of people the scenario is set in the here and now, and that's kind of an ambiguous, like between the 90s and now. Mm-hmm. Like Delta Green games are typically set in the 1990s, and you don't really think about the stuff that makes these few years different from even the early part of the 2000s. But there are important differences.
Because I actually call it the 80s and 90s was kind of like abandoned industrial areas.
Yeah.
Now it's more kind of like abandoned suburbs.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, the 80s have a distinct aesthetics that
Rust Belt kind of
yeah,
stuff.
the Rust Belt. Well, I mean, 80s Miami, everybody knows what that's like.
It's either brightly colored,
or Bruce Springsteen.
or drab, dim,
Yeah.
factories just rusting in dim light.
Yeah, and then in the 90s you have grunge and blah blah blah, gangster rap, and so you know what these eras are like. So so think about the era you're in right now that makes it interesting or unique, and apply that to your horror games. I think the players will like it a lot more, and they'll respond to it more. So and so don't think don't just because your players have cell phone or smartphones doesn't mean you can't isolate them. They can text and call and Skype and get GPS maps, so that isn't going to help them.
No, because in the end, like all that stuff, it's dependent on an authority responding to you.
Yeah, or anyone, just another family member, friend, or stuff like that. People are isolated.
I just remember Kitty Genevieve's. Yeah, sure. Everyone might hear their call for help, but but just might assume their neighbor took care of it.
Some things never change. All right,
exactly. War never changes.
So next up, Tom will have a letter.
Yep.
We'll have some shout-outs, and then we'll have an anecdote, a horror-related one. So we'll be right back.
Well, Halloween is only a matter of days away. That means a lot of different things depending on one's perspective. To me, it means two things: candy and drunks. Now, both of these things happen many times a year. What makes Halloween special is that I get to see both with people in costumes. Sure, I could see a busty girl vomiting in public on many nights of the year, but only on Halloween can I see a busty girl throwing up in public while wearing a sexy nurse outfit. By fuck, I love the holidays. It is also a time of year that I watch a glut of horror movies. I watch horror movies throughout the year, but October is the month I really celebrate them. And as a horror fan, I notice trends in such movies. One of those trends is the way horror movies can make certain professions terrifying. For example, Silence of the Lambs made psychiatric medicine horrific. The Exorcist had the clergy. Saw had mechanical engineering. From Beyond had theoretical physics. The Blair Witch Project had amateur filmmaking. After that, about 9 trillion movies also had amateur filmmaking. This letter, I would like to explore the professions that have yet to be focused on in horror movies. Let's start with a chiropractor. While I have never had the experience of an adjustment, I have heard the noises from an exam, loads of bones and tendons cracking and yelps of pain. It wouldn't take much imagination to think of Sweeney Todd, the chiropractor, luring victims into his clinic and snapping their necks and spine. Or how about a glassblower? Some bearded Silver Dollar City craftsman who chops up corpses and throws in the pieces into some blown glass pot. He could claim the body parts were tiny bubbles of imperfection, letting the tourists know it was indeed handcrafted. Another that could be done is a dermatologist. Doesn't sound scary, but they are the only doctor that uses liquid nitrogen regularly in their work. Imagine some Anton Sugar dermatologist wheeling around a tank of liquid nitroglycerin, freezing his victims' faces off and shattering them with a reflex hammer. Finally, how about a psychopath that works for Best Buy as a Geek Squad member? He could travel to clients' houses, and if the person turns out to be a moron who forgot to plug the computer in, he stabs them in the eye with a soldering gun. It could be called tech support. So as your season of drunks and candy approach, don't fail to see the horror potential in the people you see working around you. Whether it is the UPS guy with the eye patch or the fry cook at Waffle House who constantly mutters to himself, and the only sound you can make out is your first name, recognize the grisly scenario that could unfold. That's what Halloween is all about. Happy holidays.
That was a good letter there, Tom.
Well, thank you, Russ. Chiropractor.
All right.
Or dermatologist.
Yeah, very good. And drunk girls vomiting. So
always.
The classic.
In a sexy nurse outfit.
Shout outs.
All right.
First off, let's talk about one I think we're both going to share. Movie.
We watched.
Yeah, Seven Psychopaths.
Yeah, watched that last night, man.
Yeah. Well.
Wow.
It's from the same writer-director of the movie In Bruges, which is a must-see. I know you haven't seen it yet, Tom, but you really...
I plan to.
You plan to. It's amazing. But anyways, in Seven Psychopaths, Christopher fucking Walken, sorry,
Tom Waits.
Motherfucking Tom Waits. Colin
Farrell.
Sam Rockwell. Woody Harrelson. And there's 7 psychopaths in the movie. And
They really are.
They really are pretty fucking psycho. And I don't want to say much else because it's just so great, and it's a delightfully twisted movie that you really just need to see. It goes in very unexpected places, and it's just super. It's just swell. It's just
and a
super.
Shih Tzu,
and and it's Christopher fucking Walken. I mean, what? How can you go wrong?
Being him, just being him.
Yeah, exactly. So
you do not mess with
it's
that.
It's an art house movie. It's not going to play in mini theaters. It's not getting a lot of marketing budget or whatever. But it's worth.
It's well worth the admission.
So first off, I would like to mention Kerberos Club, the Fate edition. As you know, Base Raiders is going to be using Fate RPG, and
sure.
Kerberos Club, which was originally a Wild Talent setting. Is now they came up with a standalone version of it for using the Fate RPG rules, and the guy who wrote it, who did the adaptation, Mike Olson, came up with what he calls Strange Fate, which is a variation of the Fate RPG rules that has their own rules for superpowers, which are a little simpler than Wild Talent's, a little more streamlined. Well, it's a Fate RPG system, so it's totally different.
Sure.
And I've been reading up. I really like it, and I'm going to be adapting it for Base Raiders, so you'll be seeing another version of that soon. So yeah.
So learn to check it out.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
So and Kerberos Club is just great. I mean, steampunk superheroes, Victorian era superheroes. So what
more do you want?
Yeah, exactly. Jesus.
Come on, Beal. And next up is a movie that Ross and I watched with a group of associates.
Well, RPPR crew. Yeah, Jason, etc.
People that best people in the world.
Yeah.
Anyway, the movie is kind of a horror comedy. Horror buddy comedy called The Revenant.
Yeah.
And basically about a guy that gets killed in, I believe it's Iraq.
Yeah.
He gets killed, body's sent back, big funeral, and then he comes back to life as an undead.
Yeah.
A proper undead.
Yeah.
Essentially, using zombies of the world, he comes back as a talking zombie who's not quite psychotic yet.
Yeah. So he goes back to his stoner friend, crashes at his pad, and things go...
And his friend tries to help him out in his new existence.
Yeah. And his girlfriend or his fiance tries to deal with this. And it's just it's a crazy movie.
It will go places you did not expect it to go to.
Yeah. Oh my God. And it's hilarious. It's great for Halloween. It's pretty gory if you're a gore fan. And it's got a little bit of everything. So
it's definitely one you should check out. Yeah. The violence, gore, what more do you want?
Yeah, people are very demanding.
Yeah.
So next up, I'd like to talk about one last show that I've watched on Netflix, and it's on Amazon too. It's called Ultraviolet, and I'm not talking about the movie.
Good.
Yeah.
When you first mentioned that earlier, I'm like, what the hell are you talking about?
No, this is a TV show. I found out about through Adam Scott Glancy on his Facebook feed. Ultraviolet was a British miniseries, 6 episodes long, about a government task force tasked with tracking down and killing vampires. There's a conspiracy of vampires, and the British have to stop it. And so
Thank you, British.
Yeah, it's like a police procedural, but the bad guys cannot be seen, cannot be recorded by video or audio equipment, and they're fucking vampires. So how
do you deal with that?
Yeah, what's interesting is how the series goes into a lot of the moralities. Like frequently in the episodes they'll capture someone who's helping the vampires, a human who's helping them in exchange for being turned into a vampire. After they're helpful, and they're like, "How dare you do this? They're just people too. You're Nazis. You're committing genocide." But the vampires, they don't kill us. So so it's like a conundrum, like a moral dilemma, like is killing vampires morally defensible? If they're not active, if they don't
question
kill people,
for the ages.
And the main character is a police detective who's roped into doing it after he stumbles upon the conspiracy. And Idris Elba, who was he was in the Thor movie. What was it? Heimdall. He was Heimdall in the Thor movie. Some people also know from The Wire, and this is one of his earliest roles, and he's really good in that. And it's just a really good, 6-episode thing. So watch it on Netflix. Each one's about 50 minutes long, or you can get the DVD. And it's great material, especially if you're preparing to run Night's Black Agents like I am.
Good. I can definitely see how you do that.
Yeah. So, Vampires and Secret Agents, fun stuff. And finally, I want to mention 2 podcasts that both interviewed me this month.
They like you. They really like you.
Yeah, I know, right? The first one is Metagamers Anonymous, and the host Eric interviewed me about podcast stuff and online public radio and horror and all that. Well, actually, it wasn't much about horror. Well, it's a little bit of everything. Anyways, I'll put a link to the episode so you can listen to the interview and I can talk about all kinds of stuff. And then Carpe Diem, which also interviewed more specifically about horror. So I talk about things I talk about on RPPR more, which is like pacing, timing, the difference between a mystery horror game and a survival horror game, and some of the things that I find interesting that would be good horror fodder, like architectural blogs and a lot of stuff. So the Metagamers Anonymous is already online. Carpe Diem should be online by the time this episode goes up. If it's not, I'll put a link to the main podcast, and you can just keep an eye out on that. So they're both new podcasts. They're only a couple months old each, but they know how to interview people.
Nice.
They did a good job.
Like, I'm Ross Payton.
Yeah, exactly. So,
like, I'd like to show your attention to all my awards behind me.
Yes.
Like, I'm sorry I can't talk to you with this wallet full of cash and credit cards.
Well, no. Well, I'm a game designer, Tom. That last part.
Yes, good.
The awards, yes.
Now I think I'll go out, jump out the window to see if I can fly. Seem to have finally overreached myself.
Thanks. So.
Look out below. Whatever. That was Kids in the Hall, by the way.
Yes. As well, I'm aware of. I know some other people wouldn't be. Finally, I like to do some anecdote.
Sure.
We need to do the anecdote.
And considering this time of the year, it's got to be a horror anecdote.
Of course. And this weekend, I ran a horror one-shot based on the PC game Lone Survivor.
An admirable feat considering the time he had to prepare.
Yeah. Tom was basically the original. Okay, the original thing was Tom said he was going to run a Call of Cthulhu one-shot. And so, all right, fine. Then, 2 hours before the game starts,
I realized Aaron wasn't going to show up.
Yeah. So we're like, oh, well, I'm not going to run anything, Ross. Like, well,
what do you have?
I'll run something.
Well, I didn't have.
Okay, we'll do it live.
Basically, yeah.
So I look.
Ross O'Reilly over here.
Yeah. I think about something, I actually have a thread on the RPPR forums, like upcoming one-shots, and I look at them, and most of them are in different systems, like Dark Heresy and Rogue Trader, and I want to run them, but I need more time to prep something like that. So I need something that I'm familiar with. So Fear itself is about as simple and easy system to run horror as anything.
Character creation went quite quickly.
Yeah. That and Call of Cthulhu are the only systems I had to have people create characters before the running a game. Any other system I'd have pre-gens.
Yeah, or tell them to come prepared.
Yeah, exactly. So definitely, like Eclipse Phase.
Oh, yeah. But then again, thank you for that program. That works just fine.
Yeah, the spreadsheet, the character, yeah. But anyway, so the basic premise of Lone Survivor is you're a lone survivor of a plague. Like there's a plague that wiped out the city, killed most of the people, and the ones it didn't kill are mutated monster things. So I modified a little bit. Everybody wasn't trapped in the same apartment building, but 2 of the PCs had people they were taking care of that helped recover their sanity. The other person, David, was better at combat and fighting investigation, but didn't have anybody to take care of. So he talked to a skull of a former person he knew. So
perfectly normal.
Yeah. And so I had the game. We started the game. So I don't need to talk about it.
Yeah, and for the record, I did not play a German werewolf guy.
Yeah.
No, I was actually a psychiatrist, and I had mine was a female patient that I had found in a hospital. Who basically was undergoing surgery at the time the plague hit, so she was just left there. So I saved her, and it was a game of choices.
Yeah.
We had stuff we had to do, but it was up to us how we did it.
Yeah.
And if we kept those people we were looking after alive or ignored them.
Yeah.
So it was all about choices, and I think at some point in the game I kind of realized what the general idea was and what we should probably avoid doing. So now I went along with that. It turned out to be the correct thing to do, but just the whole journey to get there was really great.
Okay.
I don't want to reveal too much before it's posted. You know.
Well, it's gonna be. I'm definitely gonna make that one of the preview episodes. For
Sure.
The Base Raiders Kickstarter. Hint, hint, hint.
Nudge, nudge. Say no more.
So it'll be a while before you get a chance to listen to it. There any particular favorite bits or player moments or anything?
I think we all had our moments in that game.
What about yours?
Well, I made a joke that apparently just killed.
Yeah.
I forget the joke right now, or maybe I don't. I do remember it. I'm just making you pay for it just to listen to my awesome joke.
Yeah, or wait for months and months at a time.
And let's be honest, you can't do that.
Yeah. So in Lone Survivor, one of the other mechanics is premise of the game is that you have these weird dreams, and you talk to people in your dreams. And when you wake up, you'll have pills in your medicine cabinet, green, red, or blue, and each pill has a different effect. And
depending on and effects of what popping them has consequences sometimes.
Yeah. So some pills were each pill.
Some pill makes you larger. Some pills make you small. And the ones that mother gives you. I'm sorry, one.
Yeah. So I let them experiment with that, trying to figure out what each pill does. Let them figure out how they're gonna. First, they had to get food. They had to search the place to get more supplies, and they figured out a way to get out of the apartment building. Then that was.
I think one other thing I loved. We actually had a whole really cool scene of just us having succeeded quite well in our food run.
Yeah.
Kind of just having a cool just together moment with all the survivors.
Yeah.
I really kind of like that.
Yeah. It gave me a lot of time. Like the next Kickstarter project I definitely do is going to be a horror game that's based on some of the stuff we talked about. And the idea will be it's going to be post-apocalyptic and dystopian at the same time. Well, the idea is if you live in a city, you live in this corporate controlled, everything's privatized, everything's horrible. You're just this wage slave at best.
You're a number on a ledger.
You're a number on a ledger. You're expendable. You have to, and there's these things that are crawling out of the woodworks that you have to ignore. And nobody talks about what's outside the cities. But if you're outside the cities, you're in this abandoned suburban sprawl where there are squatters and gangs and just the lights don't power doesn't work anymore, and they're even worse creatures and monsters. So like the idea is you're scavenging in suburbia, or you're trying to deal with an insane bureaucracy in the city. And that's like what I really liked about the game was how you guys like wrote down every time you found a package of ramen noodles and chips and like and a candy bar, and you just like every little scrap. Like I think Druid said at the end, oh man, I wish we could have played more, like had a campaign, like go into the city. Cause like it took you guys 4 hours just to get out of the apartment building.
Yeah.
And like that, it was already like 11. This is going to be one shot, not a campaign. So I just called it then and there.
Right.
But you could totally see how that would be a campaign.
Oh yeah, totally.
And that would be one you'd want to play, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of like what I want to go for that. But obviously I have to get Base Raiders up because I'm really excited about Base Raiders. There'll be a lot of horror stuff in Base Raiders too. So,
yeah.
Zombified clones of superheroes and
zombies.
Yeah.
What a concept.
Zombie superheroes. Yeah. But yeah, that's something to look forward to if you're an AP fiend. And I think that kind of wraps up
I think it does.
Please post any comments, feedback you have on this episode. We'd love to hear them. And
have a happy Halloween, everybody.
Yep, we'll be back later.
If we
This is RPPR episode 79, horror in the here and now. And assuming the Mayan Apocalypse doesn't happen, we'll see you guys next time.
Indeed.